Dr. Jamie Kaufman, and this is Dr. Kaufman's Acid Reflux Hour. Today I want to talk about does pH balancing help acid reflux? This is Dr. Jamie Kaufman's Reflux Hour. Before I begin talking about pH balancing, we have to have some discussion about what is pH, what is acidity, what is base or alkaline, and have some understanding of why the acidity or alkalinity of things is important in the first place. What most people don't realize is when you reflux, up comes acid, it's hydrochloric acid, and up comes this big protein, this big proteolytic enzyme. Proteolytic means it eats protein, called pepsin. It's a very powerful enzyme. This enzyme is used by scientists to break down proteins into smaller component parts. It's generally used as pig pepsin usually, but it's still used, and it's a very, very important part of breaking down. Well, if it breaks down protein in the lab, it's breaking down your protein too. So the first thing you need to know is that when you have acid reflux and you have inflammation, when you have growths, when you have trouble with reflux progressing and getting worse and worse and worse over time, it all has to do with swelling, inflammation, and it's pepsin. Now here's the deal. Pepsin is acid activated. So if you have pepsin in or on your tissue and the environment, the pH environment is 7, it's not working. It's not eating your tissue. You're not self-digesting, as it were. But if you introduce acid and acid gets where the pepsin is, then you begin the process of self-digestion. So we ought to really call this peptic reflux instead of acid reflux, but that's not going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about the pH scale. There is a scale that measures how acidic things are and how alkaline they are, and it goes from basically 0 to 14, and 7 is neutral. So something that's 7, drinking water is almost always 7, very close to 7, and normal drinking water that comes out of a faucet. But acid is pH 1, pH 2, pH 3, and it's a logarithmic scale. So, for example, pH 2 is 10 times more acidic than pH 3, and 100 times more acidic than pH 4. Alkaline starts at pH 7. And for example, alkaline water, pH 9 and pH 10, is like the complete opposite of acid and will neutralize acid. And there's another thing that's really good. The pepsin breaks down. Pepsin is deactivated. The pepsin molecule is broken in an environment of pH 8 or higher. And so the question of pH balancing is how not to feed acid to pepsin that's in and on your tissue. And before I forget, people ask me, how long does it take to wash out pepsin? And the answer is it takes about 2 to 4 weeks, and that's assuming you're not continuing to reflux and depositing more pepsin on the tissue. So the whole idea of taking lemon, of taking hydrochloric acid, of taking apple cider vinegar, while it may do something for some people, it's bad for reflux because it activates pepsin. So the whole idea is to have a diet that's pH 5 or less, particularly when you're in the detox phase. So if you think about it for a moment, there aren't very many foods that are alkaline. In fact, alkaline water, which is readily available, and even the drops, I've written several articles on my blog, jamiekaufman.com. The most recent one on alkaline water shows a man that's made out of water. That's the one you want to read. And it can be any pH that's high. pH 10 is great, and we drink it. There's no side effect of alkaline water. Let me say it again. There isn't any. If you say, I drink alkaline water and I get headaches, it's psychosomatic. If you say, I drink alkaline water and I get diarrhea, it's psychosomatic. So there is no side effect of alkaline water. Now, there may be side effect of other components. For example, Coca-Cola, I think it's Coca-Cola, has a brand called Essentia. At 9.5, it's everywhere, but it contains phosphates, and the phosphates apparently burn some people's throats. So I don't recommend an alkaline water that has phosphates in it. But alkaline water is the most, if you will, alkaline or basic. Base and alkaline are the same thing in nature. A second, something we use a lot, are milks. I'm personally using only unsweetened almond milk. I've used it for years and years and years. I don't think there's anything wrong with soy milk or other milks, but they're all about pH 7.4, which is great. So if you put your cereal in, and you put a banana in, and you add milk, let's just say alkaline, at 7.4, and your cereal is, let's just say something like Krispies, Rice Krispies, you got an alkaline environment. So you could add some additional fruit that is acidic, and that's pH balancing. So you take something that's acidic and you take something that is alkaline, you bring them together, and you get pH neutral. Now, if you eat something acidic, let's just say I allow a little bit of balsamic vinegar and vinaigrette during the detox phase. Well, you should be drinking alkaline water. Now, before I forget about this question of alkaline water, in that article on alkaline water, the one with the man made out of water, at the very, very end, you'll see, I don't have any on my desk, you'll see blue glass bottles. Any spray bottle will do, but these, if you don't lose the top, they don't leak. It's like a thing on Broadway. Everybody's carrying a little blue bottle if you're doing 8 shows a week and you're singing on Broadway. But anyway, you can spray your throat, and here's why. I'm not going to let this go without discussing it. When you, let's just say you're a singer, an actor, a professional voice user, and you have reflux. When you reflux at night, you get acid and pepsin on your vocal cords. Alkaline water can kill pepsin. Pepsin dies at pH 8. The problem is when you swallow water, your throat clamps as tight as your fist to prevent aspiration, to prevent water from going down the wrong pipe. And so if you want to get water on your vocal cords, a little sprayer will do. Just lower your tongue and spray with alkaline water. Just water. So we know that spraying with alkaline water is beneficial and helps hasten or wash out pepsin in vocal cord tissue, and it's used by millions of people apparently at this point. So remember the pH scale. 7 is neutral, 1 is acidic. Stomach acid is generally 1 to 4 pH. Alkaline water is generally 9 or above that we like. And milk is around 7.4, we like that too. pH balancing, how do you do it? Well, one way you can do it if you eat something acidic is to drink alkaline water and or spray alkaline water. And also mixing things. If you read my blog, there was actually a post on pH balancing, and I talk about how I make a smoothie. There are available on the internet ice cube trays with ice cubes that are tiny. They're about 3 or 4 millimeters. And you take them, they're cheap, and you put them in the freezer with the alkaline water pH 10. And when you go to make your smoothie in the morning, take that out first, and then go ahead and use a banana and put in your milk, which is 7.4 alkaline, very, very alkaline. And then you put your ice cubes in, and probably you can put whatever else you want in except citrus or very, very acidic. And by the way, there's also a post, all the acidity pH of all the fruits and vegetables. So use the blog as a resource. So you can go in and type acidity of vegetables and fruits, and up will pop that article. You can find pretty much most of what I'm talking about in all of these sessions on the blog. There are 100 and something, 136 posts on there. Most of them are there because I felt something needed to be explained, or someone asked me about it. For example, someone said I have an inlet patch and they want to take it out surgically, and so I wrote an article on inlet patches. If you have an inlet patch, read that article, and it shouldn't be touched. So, what are the worst foods? What are the ones you need to stay about? The pH balancing becomes, impossible. Anything comes out of a bottle or a can. Sodas, fruit juices, energy drinks, they're all the same acidity as stomach acid. The FDA said that they had to be acidified years ago in the 70s, and you've never heard of anybody getting E. coli from drinking a Coca-Cola The pH is around pH 3, same as stomach acid, and all of them are. So if you really have reflux, you ought to confine your diet. You avoid alcohol, avoid anything in a bottle or can, seltzer included, and you drink water, tea, and coffee. And coffee and tea in moderation. There's an article on caffeine. I stopped drinking coffee. There's about 60 milligrams of caffeine in a cup of coffee and 40 in a cup of English breakfast tea. I drink 2 cups, that's it. So about 80 milligrams, 100 milligrams should be your top before you start thinking about lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. Anytime you're having something relatively acidic, consider, if you can, taking that and seeing what happens if you put it in milk. Get some pH paper and smash it up and see what the pH is. Ideally, you should have a pH of better than 5 or higher than 5 in your diet if you have serious reflux. So people say, well, what about your reflux diet? And the answer is, during the detox phase, for sure, the first 4 weeks, only fruits, melons, and bananas. And, we avoid a lot of stuff. It's a low-fat, low-acid diet. But remember pH balancing, because it will always help. And remember both alkaline water and alkaline water spray. So I want to reiterate, there is no downside of alkaline water. And I also want to reiterate, I'm about to go to the questions early for this session, but I'm sad when I read the questions, because the questions tell me that the information that's on the internet is so wrong. I mean, that's the only word, just information. No, wrong, okay? For example, the sun is not made out of Swiss cheese. It isn't. That's wrong. If you think it's made, if a conspiracy theory says Swiss cheese is what gives us light, and it doesn't. It's not Swiss cheese. And the same is, it's that ridiculous, okay? So a lot of these questions belie the underlying questions of how you approach reflux. And I'm sorry to say, I'll dispel as many as I can. But before I do that, I've sort of changed in terms of how I talk to people that do consultations with me. I think the first thing you need to know is that reflux is not a medical problem. Reflux is not a medical problem. I mean, it can cause medical problems. It can cause asthma. It can cause stenosis or strictures. It can cause things that need attention. It can cause a lot of trouble. It can cause cancer. But reflux is not a medical problem. There's not a better pill, a better procedure, a better thing you can put on your neck. None of those things matter. Reflux is about diet and lifestyle, period. End of story. You have the best surgery by the best surgeon. I've told this story before. A lovely woman had the surgery, and she was having her dinner at 8 o'clock and going to bed at 10 o'clock, and she was refluxing every night. And the reconstructed valve, which was a big bunch of fat tissue from the stomach, the stomach wrapped around the esophagus, was just as stiff and swollen and ineffective as the little valve was before. So inflammation and swelling can make even a good surgical repair not work. Now, it doesn't mean that the repair is gone. If the patient would behave themselves for a while and the inflammation would stop, everything would go back to a healthy state with a good, effective surgical repair. So, there's another thing to say about that. I take care of respiratory reflux. That's the new term for LPR. And respiratory reflux can affect the ears, nose, throat. Turns out, I'm doing a study now, looking at the data from 100 consecutive people who do consultations with me. They fill out forms and then I probe. And it looks like shortness of breath is one of the biggest, maybe number 2 or number 3 symptoms of respiratory reflux behind postnasal drip and too much mucus. That's number 1 and number 2. So then the question is, okay, you have respiratory reflux into the respiratory system. How good is your gastroenterologist? And the answer is, in my opinion, useless. Let me say that again. The go-to doctor for reflux, the gastroenterologist, is useless for the diagnosis and management of respiratory reflux. And by the way, so is your ENT and so is your pulmonologist. Nobody's trained in this area, and neither is your naturopath, and neither is your nutritionist. So reflux is about diet and nutrition, and the things that we know about it that are important. For example, if you eat too close to bed. I have a woman I did a consult with, and she said, in the end, I'm eating chocolate every night before I go to bed, and nothing to change it. And I said, you will reflux the rest of your life. You probably end up having significant problems, snoring, sleep apnea, and worse. Cancer develops, all airway cancers as a result of reflux. So, to the questions, and actually one more thing. If you have reflux that's bad, you have to do a detox program. It means a month of whatever it takes to stop reflux. And that, in my opinion, is everything. Everything that I've written about. So diet is just one piece. Eating so many hours earlier, sleeping on an incline, taking famotidine. So you got to read the detox program. You got to read the articles that I've written that specifically address what happens when your reflux is bad. So the idea of I'm going to take DGL, or I'm going to get this little device that they're selling in Sweden, or none of those things are important. Okay, so we spend $1 trillion a year on treatments that don't work for reflux alone. That's a lot of money. But a lot of people are getting rich, but none of them work. TIF is a ridiculous idea. The magnets, I mean, really, we've seen nothing but problems. And so it's about diet and lifestyle. So let me begin by talking to Tina for a moment. Please consider discussing the safest source of iron. I have low ferritin as an athlete. Now, I would ask you, is your complete blood count normal, CBC normal? Okay. And, if all that's normal, I don't know what serum ferritin is and why that's an issue. There are metrics about whether your iron is okay. But in any case, it says the diet includes almost no iron. Okay, that's not true. So both poultry and fish contain significant amounts of iron. I particularly like sardine, salmon, and haddock. Okay, good protein. I eat a ton of chicken. I learn how to cook a chicken breast. It's online. You got to put it in brine. You got to cook it with a meat thermometer so you get it the right temperature, and you can use it for everything. Last night was a beautiful salad with chicken. And so there was a salad that had no protein that we added protein to. So a lot of assumptions in this that are wrong. So diet has no iron, not true. Pepsid interferes with a little bit of iron I am eating. Not true. 100% not true. The chance of that is 0. You have tons and tons of acid. The idea that you're not making enough acid. If you take 40 Pepsids a day, you're still going to make a ton of acid. You'll make less. Maybe it was 2 tons now. If you take 19 Prilosec a day, instead of making a ton of acid, you're still going to make a half a ton of acid. And by the way, there's no such thing as not enough acid. Oh, what if I don't have enough acid? I've done pH studies on thousands and thousands of people. First thing we do is go in the stomach and measure the pH. Everyone has acid. If they don't have acid, they have a rare disease, and I mean rare, called pernicious anemia. And that particular disease you can look up. It has B12 deficiency and an atrophic stomach, which is basically without any glands that make acid and pepsin. So first he says the diet includes no iron. Incorrect. Pepsin interferes with the acid being absorbed. That's not correct. You mentioned bison. I think they're lovely animals. I'm glad they're coming back. Will that cause a reaction? What about oysters? So I need a meat-based source to be a... So anyway, this question, Tina, and I love you for putting this in here, is just so off. You need to go on my blog and start reading. You need to start asking questions. We'll tell you a funny story. I was a vegan for 4 years, and I got a little too skinny, I think. And my friends didn't like the way I looked. I've told this story before, I think. And I looked in my pantry, and there was a can of sardines. By the way, about 2,000 calories and 45 grams of protein a day. That's what you need. So I looked at this little can of sardines and olive oil, and it had 26 grams of protein. And at that moment, I became a cheating vegan. By the way, there's an article called Cheating on the blog. And I'm a big eater of poultry and a big eater of fish. In fact, I had lox and bagels for breakfast this morning. So these diets, let me just make one other comment. Vitamin deficiency doesn't exist in America. I mean, it does exist, but for all of you with reflux and you're worried about not absorbing this and that, B12, none of these things are true. Okay, so in my opinion, people, particularly women my age, need B12, D3, and a multivite. That's what I take. You can take fish oil or magnesium, better prunes if you're having trouble with constipation. And but the whole supplement industry, and I might mention chondroitin, glucosamine, and B-complex vitamins all cause reflux in particular. So understand that your understanding has to be more global. What time am I eating? How much fat is in my diet? How acidic are the foods? Am I doing pH balancing when I can? By the way, the salad had balsamic vinaigrette in it, a lot of olive oil, and the chicken, and alkaline water. And you can use alkaline water for everything. It's not a problem. It's water. So, Tina, can I discuss a good meat-based source of iron? Chicken, fish. Next question is from Nyla. 2 questions about burping connected with respiratory reflux. Burping is essentially aerosolized reflux event. The lower valve opens and up comes air. May or may not have a lot of acid and pepsin. It may be aerosolized, and nobody knows. Nobody ever measured that. The same person wants to know at nighttime gasping for breath. Okay, now if you wake up in the middle of the night coughing or gasping for breath, it's not COPD. They advertise that on TV. It's reflux. So if you wake up in the night and you can't breathe, that puts you in the championship division of refluxers. So you ought to be eating 5 hours, stop eating 5 hours before, minimum. If you go to bed at 10, you're going to close the kitchen at 5. You ought to be sleeping on an incline. You ought to be taking all the medicines I recommend, the famotidine, the alginate. You ought to be chewing gum. You ought to be everything, all of it. Detox diet. So waking up in the middle of the night gasping for breath is a sign of, we usually say silent reflux, respiratory reflux, silent nighttime respiratory reflux, not silent respiratory reflux. So I consider that one of the worst symptoms, meaning you're a terrible refluxer and you need to go back to the square one. And the shortness of breath, by the way, I want to quickly discuss shortness of breath. In people that I do consultations, they say shortness of breath. And what I say is, listen, there are at least 3 types of shortness of breath. The first is shortness of breath with exercise or exertion. So you go up 2 flights of stairs quickly and you're huffing and puffing. Really, 2 flights of stairs shouldn't be huffing and puffing. So exercise or exertion, that's type 1. Type 2 is you can't move air in and out. For example, asthma, the tubes in the chest are swollen, you can't get the air out of your chest. Or laryngospasm, which I suspect Nyla you have, is trouble getting air in. By the way, if you have trouble getting air in during an asthma attack, you don't have asthma. So, gasping for breath. I'm not going to talk much more about it. The third type, however, so we got air obstruction, shortness of breath on exertion, and finally difficulty or discomfort taking a full breath in. I'm going to call that Kaufman's sign. Nobody's ever reported. How do you study it? But I can tell you, when I have people who complain, respiratory reflux patients, who complain of shortness of breath, 2/3 of them complain of trouble or difficulty taking a full breath in. So if you have trouble taking a full breath in, you still have reflux. You still have respiratory reflux. So Corey asked the question, after 6 months on diet, I hope I'm not haranguing today. I'm doing the best I can. But a lot of these questions sort of got my goat. And I'm not going to get to the ones that were really, you should know better ones. But I will answer some more. After 6 months on the diet, I feel so much better. I still have to clear my throat all the time. So the answer is, your diet made your reflux better, but you still have reflux. What can I do for that? Detox. Everyone should be typing in. By the way, everyone sign up for the blog. Put your name in. Every week you'll get the title of a post in an email. If you're interested, you'll open it. Otherwise, you delete it. Next week is on why I stopped using proton pump inhibitors. 2014. So, it doesn't take just diet, Corey. It takes more than that. What time are you eating? How much alcohol are you drinking? And all of these things. There's an article on alcohol. There's an article on everything. So when you go into the blog, you can type in alcohol. You can type in hiatal hernia. You can type in most things you can find. It is a book. It's a fragmented book, but it is effectively a book on respiratory reflux, my blog. I'm extremely bloated while healing phase of alkaline diet. I don't understand how that could be. You're eating something too much that makes you bloated. Can Beano and Gas-X be taken? And the answer is yes. And I have a lot of people who like Beano. I've never taken it personally, but Beano is good for gas. Peggy wants a show dedicated to food. Look up Cheating, and you'll see healthy food. Cheating vegan. A lot of fish, a lot of poultry, not too much beef, and so on. I'm only going to do 2 more questions or a couple more quickies. Is there a tiny bit of chocolate one can take before the threshold of, I don't know what this is, serotonin and relaxing esophageal sphincter? The answer is, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. I had reflux big time a long time ago. I could be behaving myself a whole weekend, moving in the right direction, and eat one chocolate chip, and it was off to the races for the weekend. So chocolate is a big trigger food. Just, believe it or not, just behind alcohol. Alcohol's number 1, chocolate's number 2. And we don't know. That's a trigger food. It's not just the amount. So I would say if you're refluxing like a bandit, chocolate should not be on your menu. Can you speak to other coffee candies? This is Elma. Are safer to eat in lieu of coffee? Caffeine is caffeine. I've written an article on caffeine. I really loved the article. As I said before, 90 milligrams of caffeine in a full cup of black coffee, 40 milligrams in a black tea. I don't drink coffee anymore, so I drink black tea in the morning, and then I move to other teas. One of my favorite is called Turmeric Bliss. I have a lot of different teas that I have. I have some that have very low caffeine that I might have in the afternoon, and then I go strictly to mostly chamomile and ginger tea. I've become a big fan of ginger tea since I wrote an article on ginger not that long ago. Any suggestions? This is going to be my last question. I got to tell you, I want to just, I don't know, eat this one whole. Any suggestions for when an esophageal doctor doesn't think I have reflux after Bravo and esophageal testing? Gastroenterologists have no test for respiratory reflux, period. If you have respiratory reflux and no GI symptoms, going to a gastroenterologist, in my opinion, I've said this time after time, you would be better off, listen to the words carefully, you would be better off talking to a tree. So we don't know how often you may reflux on Saturday night. One reflux episode, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the stuff sits there all night. Maybe you do it twice a week. Maybe you do it every night. But it's not going to be caught by Bravo. And GI testing is really not very useful. I had recently a consultation from a patient who had seen one of the most well-known GI reflux specialists in the country, who said, "You don't have reflux, go away." When I looked at his profile and talked to him, he had profound reflux. He had everything he could possibly have, and he didn't have any GI symptoms. So it's silent reflux, silent nighttime reflux, and it requires a lot of work to fix. Now this is an important one. It says I have no reflux, but burning when speaking and swallowing. So burning throat that it's neurogenic from a bad vagus nerve. It's not just after meals. It tends to be all the time. So if it's neurogenic, it's all the time. And burning when speaking or painful speaking have neurogenic symptoms. The patient's on 21 milligrams of gabapentin and 10 milligrams of amitriptyline. Symptoms have slightly improved. My doctor does not want to increase the dosage. You got to increase the dosage. If you look at the article, I wrote a 3-part article on the vagus nerve, and you'll see in the second part there's a well-known actor who was having big trouble. And normally we go up very slowly, and going up slowly is important, increasing dose. She went from 0 to 2,400 in 2 weeks and went out to the West Coast and was able to shoot a film where she actually was screaming. So understand that for neurogenic problems, there's an article on just type on neurogenic, and for most people you need bigger doses. If you're having problems with gabapentin, you can switch to pregabalin, which is the other one, Lyrica. Well, I'm over time now. I just want to say that I want to urge you, and by the way, anything you hear on Facebook about reflux, other than about me, is wrong. Okay, I have heard some doozy questions I heard on Facebook, and so let's just pretend that that's not a source of medical information about this. Secondly, most of the information on the internet about reflux is wrong. So it's not another idea, it is wrong. And you should know that people like me spend a lot of time looking at science. If you want to look at science, you type PubMed, and up comes an opportunity to review all of the literature that's been published, that's peer-reviewed. When you're looking at a new device, however, do be careful if the only article is written by somebody who says at the bottom they have a ownership share. That's called conflict of interest. But for all intents and purposes, we're looking for things that work, and if they work, we study them. For example, Manuka honey, there's an article on that. So anyway, I wish you all well. I'll see you next month. The topic will be interesting, and I hope you enjoy the coming spring.